A very warm welcome to you. A real pleasure to welcome you. Antti, we're very pleased that you're able to make the time. I know that you need to go very quickly. But share with us, would you, your reflection on the defense and security scenario and context as you see it right now. We saw what happened yesterday, and we saw the fragility and the vulnerability that's caused by the current situation, but also, I suppose, brought an inflection mark in terms of the fact that the importance of multilateralism, in terms of being able to create some bit of stability and quiet and reason to a situation that could have got out of hand, and I'm talking about the missile in Poland. But your reflections on the current situation, and then secondly, obviously the historic decision for Finland to join NATO, and what are the implications of that for you, for the country, but also more broadly, the alliance? Over to you, Antti. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and I have to say in the beginning that I'm very sorry that I have so tight schedule today. I have to leave 11 sharp because of the government's meeting, and I cannot skip that, so sorry that we could start a little bit late this session. But if I am in the middle of my speech, my military assistant will continue to the end in that case. And hope understanding for that. But I start right now, so I will touch those items you mentioned. And thank you for the opportunity to address this Peace, Security and Defense Summit. I'm joining you live from the Ministry of Defense here in Helsinki. Dear listeners, Europe is not the same as it used to be. The unprovoked war started by Russia against Ukraine jeopardizes the security and stability of the whole of Europe, including Europe's northern neighborhood. Russia's attack against Ukraine was a full-scale attempt for invasion. It is fueled by outdated imperial sentiments and was aiming at the destruction of the Ukrainian sovereignty. It is something we hoped would never take place in Europe again. The war in the heart of Europe puts us all in a new situation. We must be ready to defend our democratic values, human rights and way of life. At the same time, we must continue to support Ukraine as they are defending their territory. The war that is now being fought in Ukraine is in many respects like the one we in Finland have been prepared for during the last decades. The fighting on the ground shows that from the military operational point of view, the war is not yet only the high-tech, hybrid and cyber war that we have envisioned in the past years. In fact, what we have seen has been quite traditional. Use of conventional ground forces as well as massive use of rockets, artillery and tanks. Perhaps the saddest part in this sad war is that Russia is targeting the civilian population and civilian infrastructure in a way that echoes the darkest days of the last century. Unfortunately, this trend has only increased in the past months when the Russian army is losing on the ground. Ukraine has defended its territory bravely and has managed to push Russian ground forces from some of the occupied areas. However, it is clear that Ukraine depends heavily on external material aid to maintain its momentum in the conflict. Our Finnish analysis of the war in Ukraine so far is that as important as the ability to counter hybrid warfare and cyber attacks is, it is still equally important to also have more traditional warfighting capabilities. These include readiness for rapid military response, the ability to sustain long-term military action, and the ability to counter large-scale attacks on several fronts at the same time. Equally, the resilience of the civilian infrastructure and population is a key factor in being able to sustain the basic functions of the society during crises. During the past decades that have been peaceful in Europe, many Western nations have decreased their military equipment stockpiles close to bare minimum. This has also affected the defense industry, and many production lines have been either closed or seriously downsized. We have all come to realize that building defense material readiness does not happen overnight, especially when so many nations want to do it simultaneously. These lessons will also be reflected in the development of our national defense in Finland in the coming years, but I believe it will affect the European Union and NATO member countries as well. We will have to rethink our defense as individual nations and as organizations. So, how does this affect the security in Europe, and especially from our point of view in the Northern Europe? Russia's blatant aggression is a culmination of years of rising tensions. Georgia 2008, Crimea 2014, and use of pseudo-separatist entities in Donbas region for many years can now be seen as a clear strategy from Russian side. Russia has been aiming at the sphere of influence-based security regimes in Europe, and the use of military force has remained a central tool for Russia to achieve its strategic goals. Unfortunately, this is now more evident than ever. When Russia did not achieve its objectives in the eastern Ukraine with hybrid means, it launched in February its full-scale military offensive against Ukraine. Russia's actions during the past decade have affected the security situation also in Northern Europe, where this negative cycle has intensified tensions and increased military activity. The military strategic importance of the region has increased, and more technologically advanced and higher performance weapon systems have been deployed in the north. The countries around the Baltic Sea region continue to increase their defense expenditure, raise their preparedness, and enhance their defense cooperation. Military activity is increasing also in the high north, and the strategic importance of the Arctic area is on the rise. There has been for a long time a conscientious effort to keep military tension in Arctic as low as possible, but now also Arctic regions are no longer isolated from global security tensions. From a military strategic perspective, Northern Europe constitutes one theater of operations during a possible Europe-wide conflict. Due to the strategic interlinkages, crisis in one area also affects other regions. Dear listeners, the military situation in the immediate vicinity of our Finnish borders remains calm. However, the risk of spillover and horizontal escalation cannot be ruled out. Tuesday's events in Polish territory illustrate how real the possibilities of accidental or intentional spillover are in this crisis. As we are still waiting for the conclusive reports on where this missile came from, one thing is certain. If Russia had not started this war, there would not be missiles in the air at all. Finland has always taken good care of its national defense capability. Even after the end of Cold War, when many considered East-West confrontation to be a thing of the past, we did not let our guard down. And at this stage, dear listeners, I am very sorry, but I have to go to the government's session, and my military assistant will go further of this. But hope that you understand the situation.
Of course, and Antti, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I know we know you're a very, very busy man at the moment, especially now. But thank you for those words, those wise words, and reflecting deeply on the implications of what's happening right now. So, but thank you very much. We'll move on. But what I would like to say to colleagues is that that sets the tone for this summit. We've already begun with a conversation about, future looking at technology and its implications on war, security, peace, and defence. We've now heard from Finland and new member of NATO joining and the implications of that. We now move on to a conversation, as you can see from the agenda, investing in Europe's military modernization. I'd like to invite our speakers to come and join us here on the chairs, and I'm just waiting for my colleague Jamie to join us because he's going to be moderating this session. So just give us a minute. Whilst we're waiting for people to join us, I just want to draw attention to the fact that we have a resident cartoonist He's at the back. You'll see this man working fit. He's waving his hand at the back. There you go. And he'll be caricaturing, in the best way, the conversation and the inputs of the day, and making his own take on it. And you'll see visual images every now and again on the board here. And we hope to punctuate the day with these comic, let's say, reflections, satiric but deeply thoughtful images that he will be creating throughout the day, as you can see. Live. So, I hope you all enjoy the rest of the day. I'm doing that classic thing, you know, where I'm waiting for someone to take over, so I'm chatting where I shouldn't be. So we have the delightful Jamie Shea turning up. Great, it's good to have you together with the Minister. A very warm welcome to you. I've been filling space, Jamie. So good to have you. I'll hand over to he's our wonderful moderator and senior fellow, and does not need much of an introduction. Over to you, Jamie.
Dharmendra, thank you very much. And like when you're commentating cricket when it's raining, brilliant improvisation waiting for me to come, and the Minister as well. So thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the year again. It's the Friends of Europe Annual Security Summit. This year, as you can see, we're looking at Europe's military modernization, investing in our military forces, and trying to identify smart solutions. So thank you, Friends of Europe, for inviting me to be the moderator of this panel. I'm immensely looking forward to it. Very briefly, just to set the scene before I pass to the Minister of Defence of Belgium as our opening keynote speaker, we are living in a deteriorating security environment. Europe is no longer at peace. We have the most destructive conflict since World War II on our continent. It's likely to continue and carry on inflicting misery and destruction for some months yet. We want to deter, but we know now that deterrence is no longer simply avoiding conflict. It's also the capacity to fight and win if conflict is imposed on us. We cannot be certain any longer that our traditional deterrents, which served us so well in the past, will work against more ruthless, more reckless adversaries, willing and able to escalate. So we need modern, capable armed forces that are up to the job. The good news is that there is now more money for these essential military upgrades. All of you here will follow the debate about 2% of GDP, the NATO defence investment pledge, the 20% of defence budgets going to modernisation. We've all seen the good news among the allies of these increases in defence spending and these commitments to modernisation, including, of course, here in Belgium as well. But more money is only 50% of the solution, because the real challenge is to spend the money wisely. What is the balance between using that money to restock our weapons stocks, which have clearly proven inadequate in view of the threats that we now face and all of the materiel that's gone to Ukraine? What's the balance between restocking and investing in the next generation of military capabilities? How do we invest in capabilities that are real game changers, that are going to have multiple benefits and advantages rather than perform one single function? How do we exploit new technologies that we talk about all of the time, like artificial intelligence or engineering, space, hypersonic weapons, but we are less certain when it comes to what exactly we need and where do they fit in? And how can we leverage them against the same technologies being developed by adversaries? We want, of course, also capabilities that make the most sense in terms of the value that they're going to give to our armed forces. If I have €1 billion left over, do I spend it on some new tanks? Do I spend it on a new cyber defense? Do I spend it on a new command and control system? Where am I going to get the maximum benefit in terms of the overall effectiveness of our forces? And finally, do we go the national route? Or is this a great opportunity to increase, particularly in Europe, multinational cooperation? But can we make multi-cooperation go faster, because we need our capabilities faster too. Finally, defence, I think, is now broadly supported by our publics. They've seen in Ukraine clearly the need for security, for collective defence. An opinion poll by the German Marshall Fund the other day even said that 70% of people in Europe believe that the European Union now is an essential security organisation, alongside NATO too. So there is support, but there's inflation, there's the cost of living crisis. Our publics will not forgive us if we waste those additional defence resources. So we have to hear about the solutions from our political leadership. We have to hear also from senior officials, from international organisations and independent specialists, and I'm delighted that today we have four of the best. First of all, Madame la Ministre, we are honoured to have you with us today to start our debate. Ludivine Dedonder, Minister of Defence of Belgium. Ministers of Defence have always been extremely important in governments, but today they are even more important given the situation. And so the Minister is not able to stay after her remarks, but we're delighted that you've been able to come and set the scene for us today. We have Kris Peeters, who is a very well-known personality here in Belgium, former Vice Prime Minister, Minister President of the Flanders region. He's now stepped up to the international level as Vice President of the European Investment Bank, a good friend of Europe. I'm delighted to welcome Jörg See, I would say a colleague of mine at NATO, but I'm not NATO any longer. I left before you came, Jörg, but delighted you're in the very important job of Deputy Assistant Secretary General for Defence Planning and Policy. And last, but of course, not least, obviously, a good perspective from the think tank environment in the form of Tomasz Smura, Director of Research at the Casimir Pulaski Foundation in Poland, the organizer of the Warsaw Security Forum, which is now one of the major conferences where we discuss these issues. So, as I said, four of the best, but the Minister is in a hurry. I stop speaking, and Madame la Ministre, vous avez la parole.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am delighted to participate in this Peace, Security and Defence Summit. It is an honor and a privilege for me to give this opening statement at the first session. This is certainly a very timely and useful discussion, and I would like to thank the organizers of Friends of Europe for making this gathering possible. It is also an opportunity to underline the key role of the Belgian defense in the European security and defense ecosystem, and how investing in European military modernization is a win-win solution. War is on Europe's doorstep for almost 9 months now. Our international order is destabilized, and our societies are currently facing fundamental challenges in the field of security and defense. In addition, climate change, energy crisis, the protection of our critical infrastructures, and the new conflict reality from hybrid threats such as disinformation and cyber attacks will test more than ever the resilience of our societies. This reminds us how much we, as Europeans, must work for a Europe of defense and a strong European strategic autonomy. In reaction to this complex and uncertain security environment, the Belgian defense response has been adapted to the new security realities. We will significantly increase our budget in the coming years. Firstly, before the war in Ukraine, we have obtained a historical growth trajectory that should reach 1.54% of GDP in 2030. Through the government agreement, Belgium will continue its path towards an effective Europe of defense, contributing to a real European strategy and autonomy, and strengthening the European pillar within NATO, which remains the cornerstone of Europe's collective defense. Secondly, It was further strengthened after the Russian aggression. It will increase by up to 2% of GDP in 2035. But not only that, until 2024, an extra billion euros has been approved to improve the military readiness and to fill several capability gaps. This budget review also demonstrates that Belgium is fully committed to the European agreements, such as the strategic compass. We have committed ourselves to a substantial increase in defense spending, a significant share of investment, a focus on strategic shortfalls, and the collaborative development of defense capabilities within the European Union. This means that we are ready to play our role as a reliable partner and to defend multilateralism within the European institutions. Belgium will not fail to recall and implement this during its presidency of the European Union in 2024. More concretely, the increase of the defense budget will strengthen European military capabilities in the medium term by focusing on the major capability shortfalls in 5 strategic areas of the EU member states' defense: air and land capability, maritime, space, and cyber security. In this respect, Belgium is sparing no effort. Through an updated military programming law, their forces in new capacity investments amount to 10.2 billion euros. Here are some elements. Development of a new cyber component to be able to face the current hybrid threats. I am delighted to have inaugurated on the 19th of October our Cyber Command. Naval cooperation with the Netherlands, replacement of frigates and mine hunters, logistical support, training. Cooperation with France in the field of land forces in the framework of the Motorized Capability Programme. A400M Air Transport Unit, Belgium-Luxembourg. Also with Luxembourg, a binational reconnaissance battalion. In addition, various other development programs are being prepared and supported, including maritime mine countermeasures systems, a future patrol aircraft, a new combat aircraft, and future armored vehicles. However, the important thing is not to spend more, but better. Through a triple helix approach, defense, industry, academic world partnership, we must be a real player in the field of innovation, especially the development and investment of future capabilities and priority niche. Purchasing and developing programs together with our European partners will allow better interoperability between our different components and a high return on investment for European industrial sector. In its quest to intensify industrial and financial incentives to invest in a strong European industrial base, the Belgian defense has equipped itself with a unique tool called the DIRS for Defense, Industry and Research Strategy. This strategy, which is an integral part of the STAR plan, was approved by the Belgian government and officially presented on the 4th of October. It is the guideline for the development and support of the national scientific, technological, and industrial potential in the field of security and defense. On the one hand, it is directly relevant from the point of view of capabilities that will be acquired by Belgian defense in the framework of the STAR plan, or that are linked to the proposed long-term technological priorities of defense. On the other hand, it also concerns the indirect relevance, whereby the Belgian defense technological and industrial base can be a reliable technological partner for the capabilities needed to achieve European strategic autonomy in the context of European capability gaps or participation in security and defense cooperation projects. Cooperation in the framework of PESCO, European Defence Fund, European Defence Agency, and NATO is one of the most important pillars. A recent example is the signature on 30th of October of the European Sky Shield initiatives, which was selected by the European Defence Fund to develop the first European defence system against hypersonic missiles. Such an approach will allow defense to become a real economic engine for society by involving our Belgian companies more and choose more European partnerships. The objective is not only to buy capabilities off the shelf, but to include defense and our industrial network in an intelligent research and development strategy, with a maximum return on investment, and by positioning ourselves as a real player in the labor market. Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war against Ukraine has created a clear shift in the security paradigm. Let me point out that the new objectives that the Belgian defense has set are not fixed and will evolve in line with the volatility and the security environment, both domestically and internationally. Thank you very much for your attention.
Madam Minister, again, on behalf of Friends of Europe, many thanks for being here today. That was an information-rich speech with lots and lots of good programs. I imagine that your colleagues at NATO have congratulated you on all of the very many ways in which you are adding capability, both for Belgium, for Europe, and for the alliance in particular. And certainly when I asked the question at the beginning about the balance between investing in the immediate and the long term, I think you've given us in your speech a very good indication of how you are achieving that balance in Belgium. So bravo for that, and certainly for the pursuit of the multinational cooperation with close partners like the Netherlands, France and Luxembourg. So you've set the scene for us very well indeed, Madame the Ministre, and wish you every success and hopefully have you back here before too long at Friends of Europe. I now continue, as I mentioned earlier, with Kris Peeters from the European Investment Bank. Kris, you are at the sort of the nexus between the financial part and the delivery part, so it'd be very interesting for us to get your insights as to how you match the finance to the capabilities and which lessons you've learned since you've been Vice President at the EIB. You're a good friend of Friends of Europe, so a familiar face, but it's always good to see you back.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. And also, I come there or you stay there?
No, as you prefer,
No,
Kris.
no, I can stay here, no problem. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's for me a great honor to be here as Vice President of the European Investment Bank. Perhaps not everyone knows what the European Investment Bank group is. We have the bank and we have the fund. The fund is also very important, the European Investment Fund. And to give you a figure, last year we invested 95 billion euros in Europe and also 10 billion euros outside Europe. Now, saying this, I'm in the bank responsible for defense, security and space, a very sensitive issue also in the bank. And I shall go directly to different points because it's not the first time that I have the opportunity to speak. First of all, I'm convinced this is a window of opportunity for our industries, for our governments to take very important steps forwards in security and defense. And this window of opportunity, certainly for industry, will close more or less 5 years from now. When we have no progress very important progress the next years, then we can have, of course, 5 years from now, also debates about European strategic autonomy and so on, but without a result, it will be not convincing anymore. That means we must now take the right decisions and the right steps. Now, I'm a banker now, not a minister and so on, I'm a banker. And I know very well that the defense industry is, I say directly, the bad guy in the room. When you go to banks and so on, they say, you're in defense, that's for us very difficult to give loans. And it's still the case. A lot of banks and so on are not in favor to provide loans, to provide credits, to provide money to the defense industry. And they're looking to us, the European Investment Bank, what are you doing? And that's a very good question. What are we doing for the moment? I started with introducing in the bank what I called SESI, Strategic European Security Initiative. And I've said we shall invest €1 billion each year until 2027, €6 billion in defense and security. And I can say that before the war, it was very, very difficult to convince the members of the board and so on to say, okay, we go in that direction. Then suddenly the war in Ukraine was there, and they said, okay, perhaps you're not ambitious enough. We must do more. Now, for the bank, there are still some very interesting and sensitive issues. We invest only in dual use. Dual use means that 50% of the costs are civil and 50% of the revenues are also civil. That's an issue still. How we can tackle that. But this SESI is, I can now announce that we have already invested more than €1 billion in this year in defense and security with the guidelines and the policies that we have put in the SESI. And I give you an example, and it was also public, because I can tell it also to you. Leonardo, you know that company very well. Yeah. They launched a project coming to the European Investment Bank, and they said, we need extra money, an amount of more or less €300 million, to invest in helicopters, in drones, in IT, in research, and so on. And I can tell you it was not an easy discussion in the board, but we approved that. Mm. That means that we are going step by step in the direction to support financially the defense industry, and that is the first step. Second element that I want to raise is when you go to governments and to ministers, certainly Ministers of Defense, and I know very well my colleague of Belgium, of course, they are not used to think the financial engineering. Most of the budgets of defense are coming from the budget of the government, and they spend X money, what is in the budget. And when you say, okay, you can perhaps be more creative and take a loan, for us, of course, from the EIB or for other banks, and then you can use your money that you have from the budget in another way, the balance that you have launched. And that is, I must say, a very difficult discussion. In a lot of countries, they are not used to go to banks or to use the European Investment Bank and say, okay, we can loan, we can have a loan and so on. Yeah. Some countries are very active, I must say, also in Europe. They know us. But I hope that in the future we shall have more projects. I mentioned one, I can mention also others. Come to us with projects, and we can try to find a solution to finance. Now, to conclude, because my time is running, I have two new initiatives that we shall now launch very, very soon. I hope that with the manpower and girl power that we have. First of all, and we of course discussed with NATO, because also there we have a good relationship, green defense. Uh-huh. That's a very interesting element, green defense. To be more efficient, when you talk about energy, when you talk about CO2 and so on, to stimulate defense to go greener. And I've met the Deputy Secretary General of NATO, and we shall try, because we have a lot of knowledge, I must say, in climate. We are the climate bank of Europe. We have a lot of knowledge, and we shall try to launch in the bank, with support of, I hope, a lot of countries and also a lot of friends of Europe, to make this green defense a reality. That means you must be innovative, you must be, and so on and so on. Second element that we are now trying to go deeper is the 9th of November, the European Commission approved the Military Mobility 2.0.
Yep.
Now, that is a very, very important discussion. Certainly, when we debark tanks and so on in the port of Antwerp, of Havre, and they must go to the border with Russia, I can tell you at this moment it will be very difficult to have your tank on the rail and have a straight transport to the border with Russia. That is amazing, that we have not the possibility in Europe to be very efficient when we talk about transport.
But we're working on it.
And we're working on it. And this we shall, once again, I'm a banker, a very important banker, to support the European policy also in defense. We shall see what we can do. And there is a huge opportunity, and that is, of course, what I try to feel. You have the green, that is very popular and very important, and you have, of course, mobility, certainly when you talk about what is the situation in Ukraine, what the transport of food and so on. These two elements we shall have as soon as possible, I hope certainly next year, two additional initiatives. We have Shea, and then we have these two. Okay.
Kris, thank you. Thank you so much. We've got a good crowd today, so I definitely want to leave plenty of time for questions from the floor. But creative, innovative solutions, role of the banks, not always evident in the debate, and the ability to do several things at once, improve your capability, but green your defense and your economy as well. Square that magic circle. Jörg, obviously NATO has been very much in the forefront of the efforts to get allies to increase their defense spending, with great success up until now. But obviously the other side of it, as I said, is how then NATO carries that forward into steering the effort on behalf of the alliance to make sure that the right priorities are being met, the right capabilities are being delivered, the armed forces have what they need. So from your perspective, how's NATO managing all of this for the time being? And by the way, let me welcome you to Friends of Europe as well.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to have you for some minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I will then depart the scene briefly.
The good thing is I don't have to operate that. It's just on. That's good. And I think my team has prepared a good draft, but I think I might just throw it away because I have this ticking clock just always against me. So I will not dwell upon the issue on the security environment again. What is striking is a quote at the beginning, and the new strategic concept says clearly at the beginning, the Euro-Atlantic area is not at peace.
Yeah.
We haven't heard that for 30 years.
No.
That's a strong statement, and I think this gives us a bit of an idea and a steer where to go. I'm not getting into the details of the Madrid summit. This is all visible, this is all unclassified, but I would like to confront you with a bit of a formula you can actually recall. We need to look into the new plans, new forces, the postures, actually what we are doing on a daily basis. We need to look into including command and control, was mentioned this morning, modernizing, readiness, and capabilities. So actually there's a bit of a long list, and you can put it into a four elements list, plus resilience maybe, plus the investment which is required to invest into the right capabilities. And I might come back slightly on the 50%, maybe is enough, not enough or enough. Anyway. What we have, and this sounds sometimes a bit technical, and I have many familiar faces in that room here, what we call is our NATO defense planning process. Sometimes it's a beast, but it's a good beast, because it gives us a structure, a process, an idea how to create new things. And just bear in mind, and this is an issue for bankers and for industry, there's always the quest for a long-term demand signal. I think such a process can do that with a reach of roughly 10 years, and I think this is what bankers would need either. And by the way, given the security environment and the discussions at the NATO headquarters, It's quite obvious, at least in our findings so far, that the direction of travel that had started in 2014 to invest in more heavier forces, highly interoperable, highly ready, was right. At the same time now, we have to look into, and you said the finding the right balance, into issues like cyber, hybrid, deep precision strike, intelligence assets we do need. And then the question is, okay, how can this complement each other? And where is the balance to find, and where can we not find a balance? In the end, it's a short discussion of, and it's easy to say, maintaining the technological edge. Doing it is much more difficult sometimes, especially when you talk about capability development. And there's, of course, a difference whether you develop a new frigate or just something you can buy more or less in the next shop, being able to cope with, let's say, quite quick developments anyway. We also use a process currently to look into stockpiles, munition, just to get a good picture and a good idea on where we are. And I think the Ukraine situation, the ongoing war there, what we have seen since 2014, I think made it quite clear that especially the vulnerabilities when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to supply chains, have become more and more evident. All of that is quite difficult to get there and always quite, I would say, expensive. Defense industries, and I think this is, the SecGen is not here, and I'm not in a position to quote him directly, but I think I could say from my daily observations, apart from looking into spending and posture elements, I think looking into industry and coping with industry, talking to industry, I think this is maybe number 2 on his to-do list. Because he knows very much that the key to success is industry. And we all understand, including my country, I'm German, defense industry is sometimes not in the happy camp. And they just need to understand now and to have incentives to invest more, and again, because otherwise we don't get it. And I think I would fully share your point, and we can discuss it. There's a window of opportunity. And if we don't use it now, we might fall back. Just coming back to the 4 elements, I said looking into the posture, looking into the forces, looking into readiness, command and control and all that kind of stuff, looking into capabilities, and I think you're waiting for that, then looking into money. And you are right, we have the 8th consecutive year now where we made it up to 2% with many nations, but not all. Given the list I've just provided, so the 4 elements, and I could even go further, I think it becomes obvious, and we know that from our findings, from our assessment, that 2% normally are not enough. So it's just a wrong story to talk about this is just a benchmark, but that is true. But just given, let's say, economic developments, everybody just make it to 2%, so it's a useless benchmark. That's not true. We counted that, and actually, including the COVID period, maybe there were 2 or 3 nations who made it into the 2% area. But 2% is one thing. It's about what you want to achieve, and what is the purpose of all of that? And I think Madrid gave us a fairly clear steer what the alliance want to achieve. But I would like to add, and I think this, you alluded a bit to that this morning, there's a strong political issue in there. Because, let's say, getting into the ideas of a new defense investment pledge, getting beyond the 2%, so really understanding that increasingly as the floor, not as the ceiling as we have it now, bears a huge political challenge and opportunity for us European allies here in Europe to do more for our security, more for deterrence and defense. We have committed to that, that's true. This requires really robust and quick implementation. But I think the opportunity piece to do more for your own security as European allies, this is the political frame I would use, and hopefully we get there by the Vilnius summit next year. Many points on military mobility. I won't do that now. I'll just leave it to the discussion, Jamie.
Thanks, Jörg. Thanks very much. That was very, very clear, very concise. Grateful for that. People who are clear and concise are always invited back, as you will be. But as I said, we can go through lots of this in the discussion. Yeah. But before discussion, we have our last speaker, Tomasz. I've introduced you already. We've had the views from governments, from international organizations. No debate is complete without the independence of the think tanker looking at it from your perspective, your vantage point, particularly coming from Poland, the country which, of course, is at the top of the news agenda at the moment. So over to you.
That's true.
Stand there, come here, whichever you prefer.
I will stay here. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for having me here. As I'm only the Polish person in this panel, and there is some focus on my country right now for obvious reason, I will try to discuss the issue Jimmy writes from Polish and to some extent Central and Eastern Europe point of view. First of all, let me start from some conclusion we have from the Russian aggression against Ukraine, as it helps us to verify some hypotheses concerning the armed forces development. So, we see that from the media perspective, there is a common imagination of the Ukrainian soldier with the anti-tank, the portable anti-aircraft systems who stopping the Russian war machine. But it's only partly true. You know, the majority, the lion's share of the defensive effort in this defensive campaign is in the hand of the professional, armored, mechanized, anti-air defense units. So, it's not that the capabilities like mine battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, long-range artillery, surface-to-air missile systems of long range, it's song of the past. It's still the center of the gravity even on the modern battlefield. Let's take a look at what Ukrainian demands us to provide them with. So they request us exactly for heavy capabilities like tanks, like IFVs, and so on and so forth. The second thing is our defense industry capabilities and capacity. So probably some of you might know that the Russians and Ukrainians fire between 5,000 to 20,000 rounds of ammunition per day. It makes us at the level of 100,000 of heavy ammo per week. So, of course, without Western support, probably Ukrainians would run out of ammunition within a week or two. But it also should make us to ask the question about the state of our the stockpiles when it comes to, for example, ammunition. And as I talked to some senior armed forces officer, there is a real problem in Europe. And there are very many of the allies who has ammunition only for maybe 2, maybe 3 days of intensive conflict. And actually, what is more important, because of the many years of defense cuts and also the lack of the investment in the defense industry, we lost a lot of capacity, and we cannot fill the gap quickly if there was such necessity. The third point is about this striking a balance between investment in the let's say, classical capabilities and cutting-edge technologies. So, of course, the battlefield is changing, and there are new important domains, but sometimes we have tendency to put more focus on the new generation technology, and the lost focus on the most important, the basic things. So, as one the general from one of the Baltic states told me, it's very cool to have advanced cyber capabilities, but if I needed to choose, I would prefer to have like several thousands of javelins or full stock of 122, 152 ammunition instead.
Yeah.
So we cannot, investing in new generation technology, we cannot forget about the very basic thing. So to conclude, let me say that in Europe in general, we need to change our minds right now. We entering in the era of great power competition. We have the war on our border. So it's not that time, when it comes to discussing our cooperation for ideas like we know from the past, like pooling and sharing, things like that, which to some extent helped us to explain the defense cuts in Europe. So we need to, it's gone. Right now we need to focus on the rebuilding of our really basic capabilities. And I agree totally with you that the 2% it's starting point. It's not the end game.
Okay.
We'll stop here.
Tomasz, thanks very much. Grateful for all of our speakers for being able to say a lot in a short space of time. It is possible, and that means that we do have time for questions. The modus operandi is as follows: 3 questions, quick, no long statements, please. Identify yourselves also. Then I turn to the panel. Panel, you don't have to answer every question. Just pick up from the 3 questions where you feel that you have insights to share. Then we move to another 3, and so on and so forth. Looks like this side of the room is the more active at the moment. So this side, please, wake up and we've spoken of balance, right? Good. So let's go. So you're the first, please, sir.
Thank you, Tomasz, for that great comment you made. My name is Oleksandr Danylyuk. I'm from Ukraine. You're absolutely right. Even in the first stage of the war, like more than 65% of all of the casualties conducted to Russian forces were conducted by artillery and tactical missile systems. Right now, it's more than 80%. So in this regard, I have a question. So definitely, NATO has problems with industrial base, and how are you going to use your political leadership and financial capabilities to fix the problem?
Okay, good. Very clear, succinct question. Thanks. Brooks, over to you, please. You're normally first, Brooks, so thank you for agreeing to be second today.
Okay, yes, Brooks, Tigner, Jane's Defense. I have a question for Mr. Peeters. As you may know, the European Defense Agency tried to sponsor a brilliant Go Green initiative which involved 8 or 9 member states of EDA to install panels, solar panels. It all fell apart because of administrative reasons, because the defense ministries weren't allowed to generate a profit, and the complexities of dealing with the private sector, et cetera. Those obstacles still remain, and it could have lowered costs for the ministries a lot, freeing up more money for them to invest in defense capabilities. Those obstacles haven't gone away. How are you going to address that? Thank you.
Okay, Brooks, thanks a lot. And we had another one on this side. Bill Drozdiak.
Yes, I want to follow up on what Mr. Smura was saying. I had the impression that one of the revelations of the conflict in Ukraine has been the dramatic impact of drone technology and precision artillery. And isn't that an area where NATO and the allies should emphasize their future technology, because they can be much more effective against heavy, expensive machinery like tanks and battleships?
Okay, thanks a lot. So we've got 3 clear questions there. So Kris, please, first.
Thank you. First of all, I must emphasize that I believe in innovation also in defense. And I've understood that drones and cybersecurity and AI and so on are very, very important. And that is also for us good news, because when you say it must be dual use, that a lot of these technologies, these new innovations are of course very linked with the civil side of the investments. That means that more and more there will be no clear border between civil and military and defense, and that is, I think, a very good evolution. And we must invest in innovative systems and in a lot of things that were already said. Then green defense, bureaucracy and so on, that I understand very well. But I'm speaking for the bank. When you have a project about green defense, you can come to the bank with the project. And we will examine the project and say yes or no that we can give a loan. Of course, I've mentioned that certainly for Minister of Defense, it's not for the moment. They know not so good the way to the bank, but I hope that will change. And we will have, as soon as possible, once again, try to have very clear policy about green defense and then discuss that with the agencies and so on to give a real dynamic approach to that. And then the last question, industrial base, yes, very important, because when you talk about 2% and so on, I can say a lot of this 2%, how to calculate and so on and so on, that's another issue. But you need, of course, an industry in Europe, a defense industry, because when you have no industry, or I shall say it positively, when you have a very important industry like the United States, it's of course easier to say we invest in defense. When you have no industry at all, then for every minister, it's very difficult to say we will take 2 or 3 billion euros from the budget.
Give it to somebody else.
Yeah, and so on. This, it is very, very important to emphasize how important this industry, defense and civil, is for Europe. And then you can, of course, as a minister say, and then we need to invest more and so on. But when you have no industry at all, for a very fragmented industry like in Europe, this is very difficult. And just let us take another view about the discussion of the 2%, stimulate industries also in Europe, and that makes for governments it easier to invest and to reach this 2%.
That's a clear message, Kris. We have to get the ecosystem right first. Jörg, please, pick up whatever you like.
I think I pick two, just pick and choose. And no, I think I will start with the latter one. As I said, we decided to strengthen our deterrence and defense. Part of it are the plans. And unlike we have been doing for the last 30 years, allies decided to put actually the needs of really strong deterrence and defense, collective defense, high-intensity war fighting, not crisis management, really in a high-intensity war, again, up front, also when it comes to capability development. What I'm saying is these plans done by the operational commands, strategic commands, will inform that kind of development and really tell us what is needed. But there's also long-term perspective. There's another command back in Norfolk, you know that, looking into long-term elements of that. What does it mean? Looking at trends, how to find the right balance. So I think this altogether will put us into a position where we can combine that. And I'm fully with you, we have different stages in the conflict where we see what is maybe successful or less successful. At the same time, if you're successful in stopping the attack or just defending, you need to think about how to exploit that situation, how to get ground again, how to hold ground again. And then you need the more, you said, classic capabilities maybe. So in the end of the day, it's a combination. The second point, an industrial base, as I said, the SecGen is very vocal on that. He talks to industry as we speak again today. But what's the role of NATO in there? We cannot sign the contracts. That's to 95% the nations. What we can deliver together with the nations is a sustainable, strong demand signal, saying actually, that's it, this is what we need. And now you need to turn it into contracts with the industry. Of course, industry, bankers, they like contracts. But I think there's an interface that could be filled more properly by a clear political signal from him, from national governments. You industry, you need to deliver. You need to raise your capabilities and capacity lines. Yes, it's difficult, but you need to do that because it's necessary. We just agreed on that. So there's a huge explanation role, I think. However, the contracts need to be signed on a national level, and it really calls for multinationality. We have a whole division looking into that, you know that, defense investment. So actually they try to pave the way for multinational cooperation. In the end, it's a decision either in Europe or somewhere else, whether we go for 5 or 10 types of main battle tanks or the opposite. As an officer with background on that, the answer is very clear when it comes to logistics, sustainability. However, there's always the issue of multinational industry, of national industry, and what is really important then when it comes to more bang for the buck, or more buck for the bang, anyway, this way.
Jörg, thanks a lot. Thanks. We're getting good answers here. But Tomasz, you obviously have your turn as well. But I would ask you to be brief because I want to swing round to this side of the room, which has woken up magnificently in the meantime, and we have more questions to come. So
sure, absolutely. So let me start from the third question concerning the UAV and take it from more military perspective. So of course, course, the UAVs are important, and we see it on the Ukraine. But without the fixed-wing capabilities, it's not possible, to operate. Ukrainians can operate with the Bayraktar striking targets, far behind enemy lines, because Russians never won the air domination over the Ukraine, because some Ukrainian aircraft capabilities. So it not works like that you can just send UAVs and they the fulfill the mission. Not having, the air control over the ground to some extent, of course. And the first question concerning the industrial capabilities, I can only agree that it all depends on the political will and political declaration. By many years of defense cuts, there was no motivation in the defense industry to invest in the capabilities, as the defense market over the war was really tight. So we need to give like very strong political signal to the defense industry and show them that we are serious about increasing the defense spending, that we need to have more capabilities, and show them timeline and convince them that there is a sense, to seek the money on the market and invest in the capabilities. And it's not so easy. It's in the defense industry, all the investments takes like decades, So if we decide right now that we should increase, I don't know what's our capabilities when it comes to MBT's production right now. Maybe in Europe, maybe we can produce like 10, maybe 20 for a year, but definitely seeing what are the lost, For example, in Ukraine, we need to have definitely more.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, very good. So, Emmanuel, you first, please.
Thank you. Emmanuel Jacob, EUROMIL, the European Organization of Military Associations and Trade Unions. I had a question for the Minister of Defense, but unfortunately she's gone, but I'm sure that somebody can react on that. The Minister said that quite recently they signed the agreement in Belgium for a cyber command. Now, several European countries, meanwhile, have set up such a cyber command. Now, we all know that one of the main challenges, and the minister already this week here in Belgium declared that one of the challenges is having the competent personnel for that. And she said she's looking forward to have more collaboration in this with the private sector. Now, my probably naive question to the minister was, but I make it now as a remark to the panel, wouldn't it have been better that we set up an EU cyber command and bring all these resources together? We talk about investing from the bank side with money, from NATO side investing in material and in structures, but shouldn't we better invest in human resources in this part? Thanks so much.
Yeah, but great to have capabilities, but you need people to operate them. Lady behind you, Emmanuel, there, please.
Thank you. Ilia Bekou from Polint Consultancy. At the start of the session, Minister said that we need to spend. We don't need to spend more, but we need to spend better in defense. And ETA recently said that only 18% of the total investment in defense programs coming from joint projects of the EU member states. So how the European Investment Bank or other funds can incentivize the member states to spend better and spend better through joint procurements?
The eternal question, if you don't mind me saying, but it is eternal because it's never been properly answered. Gentlemen there, please. And that's the third. And then panel, quick answers, if you don't mind, so that we can... There's lots of hands up, and I want to try to fit as many in as we can.
Thank you, Marcus from the College of Europe. My question will go towards how to avoid duplicities in European, like member states, armament and military equipment, since that compared to the United States, for instance, we have like multiple types of tanks or other weapons.
The duplication, yes.
Yes,
yeah.
So how to avoid that? Are PESCO projects enough to avoid that? And if not, how? Well, which is the way? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, we'll go in a different order this time. Jörg, would you like to kick us off for this second round?
On cyber, very short, there's a lot of NATO-EU cooperation on that one. On the NATO side, we definitely provide the more deterrence defense perspective on that because it's quite broad. I totally agree with you getting the right people, the workforce. That's sometimes the issue, to get the right people, so these nerds, so to speak, just to get them in. We both need them, and we need to be even better. I fully take that point. But we have different angles and views, I think, on the same topic. But there's a lot of coordination and cooperation going on. The second piece, and I think 2 and 3 is a bit the same thing in terms of the types of tanks and the number, where the answer lies to a large extent with the nations. If they are willing to cooperate, they could, and they do. We have a lot of good examples, but we have a lot of examples, I think, where we could do better. And we all, I'm very blunt, we know that. We have members of parliament in all these areas, and there's a south, maybe in Germany, looking a bit more into the Air Force, other areas looking a bit more into the Navy, or shall we cooperate with others? There's a big project. I'm very frank. And as long as we cannot overcome that national focus on a couple of elements, we in the defense planning process, we ask for the capabilities. And whether, let's say, 8 or 10 countries put their money together and do it, fine for us. What needs to be granted is the access, the interoperability, so the political unity behind that, then you can use it. So there's a lot of, in terms of explain it better than me, hopefully.
Jörg, thanks a lot. Tomasz, please.
Common procurement and duplication. So it's again the political issue. You know, I follow closely the ambitious European programs, our future combat aircraft and NBT, and probably you all know how it looks, you know, against the background of all the French and German disputes right now. So of course it's very difficult process, because you need to coordinate like military demands from the many stakeholders. You need to include the defense industry interest and so on and so forth. So you know, I count on my one hand the projects which were successful, like Eurofighter or other in the past. But nevertheless, there are always some sites we need to be flexible. You know, so it's we cannot be sure that all our interest and push all our interest to be included. Somehow we need to tell our military guys and our industry that, you know, you need to you know, sacrifice some interest because we wanted to have like common European project and so on. But it's always the political decision, you know, and political interest again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Kris, please.
Very quick. I'm a big believer of European defense because it's more efficient, it can be more supporting the strategic autonomy, and of course it's a very important, very sensitive debate to go step by step to this European defense. It's incredible that we have in Europe more than 150 different weapon systems. When you compare with the United States, they have 2 or 3 different weapon systems. So we are very fragmented at this moment. And we must go, I hope, at this window of opportunity for 5 years that we can progress. And of course, it's a very interesting initiative of the Minister of Belgium, of course, cybersecurity. But when you put all your efforts together for cybersecurity at European level with all the people that are very well skilled and so on, it's of course more efficient and less cost that you must and money that you must put on the table. Dus please, I hope that step by step we are going that direction. And I was in the European Parliament rapporteur for a public procurement in defense. I can tell you that there is still a long way to go to make it possible that some joint initiatives are on the table. And that is the case now, and I understand I try to understand the reaction of some countries. They say, okay, we have a defense industry, and we must defend that because it's employment and so on and so on. And other EU countries say, we have no European defense in my country. I'm not so interested in a European defense because we are not involved. Now, this is changing when you talk about cybersecurity, when you talk AI and so on. Also, small and medium-sized enterprises or other countries can say, okay, we are interested and we shall go forward. There is a huge opportunity. And thus I have answered the question about cyber and also better, of course, I'm a big believer. And we can, as bank, we try to stimulate that. And it's amazing, there was several years ago, the collective finance mechanism was launched. There's still 3 countries that not signed it. The question now is this still an added value to stimulate joint investments and joint projects? But you have totally right. At the European level, we can do more efficient and better and not more.
Kris, thanks. I'm going to take 2 minutes of the lunch break, and you're going to forgive me for this because we had some hands up. So the gentleman there, please. But we're going to do 1-sentence questions, sir. 1-sentence questions. You could do it. You could do it. And then 1-sentence answers. So we'll get a few in, and then that will be it. So please, sir.
Thank you. My name is Tengis Praladze. I'm from European Center for International Political Economy. You mentioned mobility, which is extremely important for European defensibility. So the question is that EU has very important project. It calls Free Sea Initiative, which is about connectivity between Black, Baltic, and Adriatic seas. Some of you,
sir,
I
this is a Proustian sentence.
Extremely skeptic towards that years ago. So what do you think about this initiative right now, and what is the bank plans to invest in this initiative?
Okay, thank you. Very patient gentleman with the beard. Forgive me for describing you that way, sir, but it's easy to recognize you.
Very much.
Microphone is yours.
Good morning, citizens. My name is Angelos Charlaftis, Epafos Advisors, who represent the Ilios, Urania and Helios Space and Defense Group. We spoken last time here at the space event. The question is very simple. You know it. It's the creation of the European defense community according to the Treaty of 1954, which resolves all these problems. Yep. Because we, here in Europe, we invented the humanities. As humans, we have 2 hands. One is the NATO, and the other could be the European defense community, which will change the whole stuff because it will put Ukraine inside, it will put Finland, Norway, and other countries.
You will forgive me, but short, precise question, please.
Yeah. Don't you think that this is better than the current situation?
Perfect. Perfect question. Thank you. And there's the lady with her hand up, Alessandra, just next to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pascaline Gabori, pilot for Dev. I have short questions. The first one, is there an agreement on the strategy? Because it's good to discuss about the tools, the banks, the industries, but is there an agreement on the strategy for military defense in Europe? Is there an agreement even on the threats? And because what we see are just at the moment more NATO and individual initiatives from the member states. And finally, how do you embed the vision on democracy and human rights, especially in the cybersecurity strategy?
Okay, so we've had some sort of big questions at the very end, but you're still going to have to answer them in just a sentence or 2 max. Tomasz, please, your final. And with apologies to those of you who didn't have the opportunity, try to grab one of the speakers during lunch to ask your question tete-a-tete. But anyway, sure. Tomasz, please.
Okay, there was a question about Free Sea initiatives, and I'm from the region. So when it comes to military mobility, I can tell from our regional point of view that there was a lot of disillusionment. You remember that European Union promised us a part of CEF $9 billion euro for investment in dual-use infrastructure. After that, after the discussion in the Commission, we've concluded with 1.5 or something. If you have imagination about the cost of the infrastructure, you know that 1.5 is like nothing. So this is the case. About the consensus in Europe, we just adopted as a NATO the new strategic concept. But I think we have this job done, and we identified the threats. You know, as a Russia main threat, China as a main challenge, and we have still the defense pledge 2%. And but as we discussed, it is a starting point. So there is some consensus even in this complicated environment in Europe.
Thanks very much. Would you like to go next, please, Jörg? Thank you.
Military mobility as such, utterly important, and we need to do better. Otherwise, we don't get the reinforcements in time when we need it. That's it. So we can be even better, and we should be. But a lot of has been done already. Strategic concept was mentioned. You know, the EU strategic compass. You can assume we talk to each other. And I think there's a lot of things we share. Interesting to see now how nations translate that into their national strategies. I would read them carefully because this is reflecting the understanding from these key documents. And finally, on Europe and defense, I think security, defense, this is all indivisible when we talk about the Euro-Atlantic area. And we have to play, as European nations have to play a major role. And when we acknowledge that, I think then we are on the right path.
Thanks, Jörg. Thanks very much. And so, Kris, the last one.
Very brief. Military mobility. I mean, the bank responsible for mobility and transport. That's very hopefully success for us, for the bank. Dus we are very used in investing in infrastructure, air, land, and sea. Dus we have a huge experience. And I think with this new initiative launched the 9th of November, the Commission, we have a second or a third attempt to make this reality. Dus we are a bank. We can finance a lot with billions because we give loans. You must pay back, of course, at the end of the day. But we are, with our knowledge and so on, we can do a lot. Dus once again, we need a project. When we have no project, we can do nothing because we are a bank driven by projects. Secondly, EU or a larger cooperation. For me, it's already very difficult to find a consensus in the European Union. I understand that the UK and so on are very important in Ukraine, but to try, first step, a very clear view when I talk about industry and so on in Europe, European Union is the first step, and then we can see how we tackle that with other countries and so on. And when you talk about military and so on, I know that UK and so on left and Brexit. That's a pity. Then last, strategy. It's very important, and we have a lot of strategies, perhaps too much strategies. We have strategy of the NATO, we have strategy of the European Union, we have PESCO, we have a lot. Now, for me, it's very important that we can convince the people in Europe that with our values and human rights and so on, when we invest in defense, it's a totally different approach when you talk about a strategy. We can defend our European values, of course, with a lot of money all over the world, the soft power of the European Union. But the war in Ukraine was very clear. We need also a hard power as European Union to talk with other partners and to say very clearly, we are a soft power, but when you do stupid things and terrible things, then we can also take the hard power on the table. And I hope that is not only a dream for 10 years from now, but that it can be realized as soon as possible. Thank you.
Kris, but also, of course, Tomasz and Jörg, many, many thanks. My takeaways as the moderator, window of opportunity, but it may close in 5 years' time, so need to take advantage now. Clear signal to industry regarding the long term, but of course that will only be of use if the policymakers give the right signal to industry, because once they start producing something, which takes many years, it's difficult to change. So we need to make sure that we predict our future capability needs accurately. We've heard about the need to build a European defence industrial base. It makes it easier for nations to come up with the money if there's an industry to invest it in. We've heard a lot about innovative solutions, particularly from the financial and banking sector. We've heard about the ways in which you could sort of kill many, many rabbits with one stone, if that's the right expression. Not we want to kill anybody here, we're defensive. But we can at least achieve multiple benefits if we get the investments right. We can be secure and green at the same time. We've heard a lot about new mechanisms, but we've also heard that there are existing mechanisms like the NATO defence planning process that are there, and we need to make full and good use of those. The right balance between commercial off-the-shelf, the quick procurement, and investing in future capabilities, but of course the need to always work on these vexatious issues of multinational programs, public procurement, industrial sharing that have often undermined the support for multinational programs in the past. Getting everybody in the game is important as well, not just in terms of increasing budgets, but procuring the capabilities. So we have a challenge, but we have an opportunity. The important thing is to focus on the opportunity, and then the challenge becomes easier. Dear panelists, thanks a million. It was great. You were on top four, all three of you today. We could have gone on longer. Again, apologies for those of you who couldn't get questions in, but we got 9 questions in today, and that's somewhat better than some of our previous performances at Friends of Europe. So we are trying, Brooks, we are trying. Now, lunch will be served upstairs. So stampede your way up the stairs, otherwise the queue may be very long. And we resume back here at 1 o'clock, where we are going south. We are going south and looking at security on our southern flank. So again, a round of applause to the three speakers, please. Thanks, Kris. No, stimulus.